I think it's really important to understand that cryptography in and of itself provides a new form of sovereignty, and that this new form of sovereignty, in my opinion, is the only way that we return to having a true law that is actually a commonwealth, where we all have the equality of the law, or better yet, we have the equanimity of the law, but the respect of the individuality through it. So for me, what crypto sovereignty is, it's about the artistry of utilizing cryptography in this way to create new systems that we can utilize for self-empowerment.
Welcome back to the Freedom Footprint Show, the Bitcoin philosophy show with Knut Svanholm and me, Luke the Pseudofin. Today, we have a very special guest returning to our podcast, Erik Cason, Bitcoin philosopher, crypto-anarchist, cypherpunk, and good friend of the show. Erik is with us in person this time, recorded at Baltic Honeybadger 2023, to take a walk through history, philosophy, politics, Bitcoin, and more. In this episode, we talk about Erik's views on crypto sovereignty, the topic of his book of the same name. We also draw parallels between the atomic bomb and the risks that AI poses. We discuss progressivism and conservatism in the Bitcoin community and investigate the conjunction of cryptography and Bitcoin. It's always great to talk to Erik. This time was no exception. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that the best way you can support the show is to send us a boost or stream us some sats via a value-for-value podcasting app such as Fountain. If you're listening to the show as a podcast, check it out on Fountain. You can earn sats from listening, and you can support us and all your other favorite shows. You can also support us on Geyser Fund or send sats directly to our Lightning address, freedom@getalby.com. And if you want to exchange your dirty fiat, you can support us on Patreon. All our links are in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the episode and subscribe to the channel. Even if you're listening as a podcast, head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe to us there. It would be a big help. And finally, we want to thank today's sponsors, Wasabi Wallet, Orange Pill app, The Bitcoin Way, Zelox, and bitcoinbook.shop. All their information is in the description, and we'll be talking a bit more about them later. And now, without further ado, here is Erik Cason on the Freedom Footprint Show.
How are we doing this, Luke? And are we?
Oh, we're already rolling, guys. So I mean,
Right.
let's just keep it going. I mean, as Knut said, like you're our first proper returning guest, and I mean, we didn't plan this exactly, but this is awesome. Like, awesome to run into you and meet you in person for the first time, and for me,
Yeah, it's funny because like it felt more casual with you, and I didn't even really I realized it was our first time, but at the same time because we know each other.
I know it's awesome.
It's funny because there's like a number of people this happens with, like with John. Too. Every time I start talking, John's like, God damn it, I wish I was recording it.
Yeah. And there's so many, like, especially here in Riga, I've had so many similar experiences with that. That's bumping into someone and you instantly connect on like this level that is just beyond, because you meet people that actually think about things. And it's, yeah.
Well, I mean, like, isn't that the truth of we're not all here because of Bitcoin, but because of the form of thought that Bitcoin allows.
Yeah, and instills within us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's I mean, my shtick nowadays is that you are your Bitcoins, and we all are the network. Like, we're not only Satoshi, but we are the actual Bitcoins, because they're just information that makes them us. And I think that's, to some extent, why they change us so much, because like you don't change Bitcoin changes you. That's profound. Like, that's so true. Like, you are the killer app of this thing. This is not a killer app of it is you, like, and it changes you.
Well, and I think it's that spark of realizing that there is a truth that we can follow, that like it jumpstarts thinking in like the truest sense of what it is.
Yeah.
And I think because like part of the nihilism of contemporaryism is that it's so deeply authoritarian that it feels like thought itself is almost seditious and misleading, because how could this thing be of value to you when, you can see out in the world, if you just obey what's being told, you'll live a relatively comfortable life. But then having this experience and encounter of like, wait, there's this other radical truth that's happening that maybe can resolve all of the problems of fiat and of the nihilism of politics and the inescapability of the fiat economy. It truly awakens us and starts to transform us. And I was sharing earlier, like I literally don't know who I would be, or even if I'd be alive without Bitcoin, because of that hope and the way that it rescued me from the nihilism.
Yeah, and I mean, a caged animal at the zoo can live a relatively comfortable life as well, but it's still caged.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of sort of my presentation in crypto sovereignty is this understanding.
Yeah, Crypto Sovereignty is your new book. We should.
Oh yeah,
tell our listeners
let's show it. I'm not good at shilling stuff. So I have a new book. It's
buy his book and my books.
Yeah, buy all the books.
And Luke's whenever he writes one.
Yeah. We're all gonna have books soon.
Yeah.
But it's available through Bitcoin Magazine. They're the publisher.
If you buy within 2 weeks, you get a set of steak knives, right?
Yeah,
maybe you might be one of the ones you pick for the set.
If you want, I'll sign and I'll put a steak knife. There you go.
It can be hard to ship to Riga, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I was supposed to get my books. I'm not sure if they actually arrived. But anyways, the reason for the book isn't to shill a book, but because I just want my thoughts out there. And I think it's really important to understand that cryptography in and of itself provides a new form of sovereignty. And that this new form of sovereignty, in my opinion, is the only way that we return to having a true law that is actually a commonwealth, where we all have the equality of the law, or better yet, we have the equanimity of the law, but the respect of the individuality through it.
Equanimity?
Maybe not. I'm kind of
explain the word. Acronymity is one of those words I find difficult.
Knut speaks Swedish. So.
Yeah.
It's more of the access to the equality of opportunity as opposed to actually saying that we are equal. Yeah. So it's like providing the level playing field so that we can have the fair game.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will mistake that to like essentially trying to homogenize everyone and say, no, we're all equal no matter what. Even if you happen to have brain damage and I happen to be Albert Einstein.
80 IQ.
Exactly. The 80 IQ meme, you know?
Yeah. Did you see Giacomo's talk?
I did. We had a great
fantastic. Yeah.
Before, where I was, because I was pointing out like, there seems to be a real quality of midwittery where there's an esteem and ego that asserts itself that both the midwits and the geniuses seem to actually lack, and them just questioning themselves to be like, well, I'm kind of a dumbass.
I think this show is going to be quite hard to follow if we just keep on talking about stuff that recently happened. It's kind of hard to follow thoughts about a talk that didn't happen.
No, but this is okay. This is super relevant because this 80 IQ thing is part of a current issue within the Bitcoin community. And the funny thing is, like, sometimes we get to a point where we're talking about like a so-called current thing, and then it goes away in like a month or something. Like that sort of happened with ordinals. But I think what we're talking about here is like a fundamental difference between. Actually, I'll give some credit to Peter McCormack on this one. Like, he had a tweet that observed that the ordinals crowd and the drive chain crowd seem to be liking the same things. And it sort of exposed a bit of a liberal Bitcoin community and a conservative Bitcoin community, as in conserving. Liberal might have also been the wrong word. It's just more like progressive maybe actually is a better word here.
Okay.
But like, what do you think about that division, that there's sort of an opening up of the people who want to conserve the protocol and keep it safe and running, and then the people who want to do stuff to it?
I think that this is this really healthy dynamic of essentially like the toxic Bitcoin crowd are these internal agitators that are always going to remind us of the truth of the mission, the need to have true alignment of incentives in a thoughtful way, and the understanding of that introducing anything else is going to change those incentives in some way or form. And also the people on the outside that are pushing ongoing developments that truly are needed. And a great example is like much of what's being built today was only possible because of getting SegWit integrated. And that was a long and difficult and arduous debate. And particularly once people stopped pushing as hard and there could be a real open dialogue about how this was going to help Bitcoin, did the possibilities that it introduced actually start to come in. So to me, like, this is the truly political process of Bitcoin that's very sloppy, messy, difficult, and important, because this is the only way that like we're actually going to figure out what we need as the developments. Like, I personally don't think that we're at a place of ossification yet, because I still think that there are some updates that need to be done in addition to, like...
You think it will ever hard fork again successfully? I mean, it hard forks all the time, but...
I think, yes, because of the 2093 bug.
Yeah. That thing that needs to be fixed. So there's an issue in Bitcoin that needs to be fixed. Yes. Otherwise, we're fucked, basically.
Yeah.
But...
And I think that this is important because it gives us the responsibility of knowing and understanding that this will happen at some point in time. And the question is how much do we want to get in front of that, or do we want to get it right up to the boundary for it to be a real crisis point?
Yeah.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, I really appreciate that there is this responsibility coming from both sides.
Yeah.
And like, I've gotten some shit for... Like, I think inscriptions are like a pretty important new technology that Bitcoin can access in a meaningful way and utilize. Like, the fact that Tankman is now on the time chain, I think, is a really important thing. And I think future...
Tankman?
Yeah, during the Chinese democracy protests and...
Oh, yeah, the Tiananmen Square guy.
Yeah, so Tankman and Tiananmen Square... That's an illegal image in China, and you can now see it directly on Bitcoin's blockchain because of what inscriptions have offered.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, like, Ordinals itself is just a randomized catalog. Anybody could do it or present it. It seems to mostly be for people to present kitsch NFT bullshit that's going to be trend towards zero. And at the end of the day, like, if people want to waste their money on that, that's fine. If you think that a stat is going to be worth more than a stat, you're welcome to that. I think it's dumb, but feel free. And this is one of the places that I think people can get too extremist, is that in the purityness of being like nothing on the blockchain except for financial transactions, I don't necessarily accept that on its face, because there could be more valuable applications that I simply don't know about.
Well, to begin with, what constitutes a financial transaction is entirely subjective. Like, homogeneity is subjective. Like, there's no such thing as fungibility, really.
Yeah.
Everything is different to different people. Like, so there are no clear boundaries here. And that's why it's so hard to box in and like explain in simple ways, because it requires this understanding of the subjective nature of everything in economics, right?
Yeah. And like that, it's a real double-edged sword, because on one hand, that provides like the total field of possibilities that we can actually access through economics.
Yeah.
However, also, like, that means we have to do the real work to understand all of that stuff. And that's one of the reasons that we have such endemic fiat brain, is that people don't know how to actually think for themselves, because they've been told what to think for so long that the foreignness of thinking for themselves feels wrong in and of itself. And for me, that's been one of the greatest struggles in me trying to orange pill people, is people being like, well, why does it have value? And I just get really frustrated, because I'm like, well, think about it.
Okay. I'm going to give an outline which I think has tangents to all of this. Like, the way I see like Bitcoin conservatism and Bitcoin progressivism, or whatever you may call it. Like, I got a question 2 days ago about like, what do you think would have happened if it would have been 42 million instead of 21 million, and like the 100 sets or 100 coins the first 4 years instead of 50, and so on and so forth? And the thing is, we know that Bitcoin works now, and we know that history played out the way it did. What we do not know is if you change any of the parameters, if that would have ever happened. So we're here to study this thing and observe it behave in certain ways, but we cannot know what would have happened if any of the things were changed. And it's very close to like the parameters of the universe, the universal constants like pi, or like stuff like that, the speed of light and whatnot, the weak force and the strong force. We don't know. We're here to observe it. And the thing is, this is the thing that religious people often tell me, that it seems designed because it couldn't have worked if the universe wasn't as fine-tuned as it is. But the thing is, if it wasn't as fine-tuned as it is, you wouldn't have been here to observe it in the first place. So like, that's a loop argument to me. And it also, in history, when you say that, like, we figured out free market economics in Western democracies, or that Judeo-Christian tradition led up to this point, and we wouldn't have this without that. I mean, it's impossible to know, and like wars created great inventions like the GPS and the radar and whatnot, and it's impossible to know if those things happened because of or despite of the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we ought to be a bit more humble when seeing the correlations between things, because like it's very likely that the scientific process would have been smoother and faster if we hadn't had, religious institutions trampling down on scientists during the Enlightenment, for instance. But also the other point of view, that we had this robust Judeo-Christian tradition, maybe that's what led up to these people thinking about these things at all. But my point is that we don't know, like, there's no way to tell how history would have played out if any of it's the butterfly effect thing. Like, if you changed something here, you change everything else. It's like the Back to the Future loop. If you could go back in time and change a little thing, you change everything. So and that plays into this Bitcoin conservatism thing, because I mean, many of the people don't understand the BIPs and understand the issues, myself included, a lot of the time. But there's a case to be made for conservatism in Bitcoin, just because it's delicate. Like, changing any of the parameters might ruin the entire fucking thing because for some reason we don't know. So that's, and I think there are parallels here to the history with organized religions, the history with like how we view the universe, the history with science and everything. Like, there's a lot of parallels.
Well, it's interesting because you actually touch on like a much deeper philosophical point of that this idea that we know something is actually like the path towards hell, and like very real genocidal, horrific amounts of killing have happened under this rubric of that. We thought we actually knew what the right answer was, and we insisted upon that answer so intensely that, here in Europe, it had, World War II was about that becoming so loud and escalated that there was literally a class of people that were like, the only way to deal with this Jewish problem is the final solution, and and like, to be clear, when you look at the Nuremberg trials, like, these dudes literally thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And like, it's insane. And this is what Hannah Arendt pointed out. She was like, look, Eichmann sincerely believed that he thought he was doing the right thing by obeying his duty to the state. And he made a whole argument that if people weren't going to do their duty to the state, that it would just be chaos and anarchy. And she was like, look at this midwit, and how when you ask him to think about an ethical prerogative on his own accords, he has no self-referenceability except for pointing back to the state. Yeah. She was like, this is literally what evil is, because it's incapable of thinking.
It reminds me of like the one of the last chapters of The White Pill by Michael Malice about the Soviet Union and the East Bloc, and how there were people were wrongly accused of different crimes, and they willingly, admitted to having committed these crimes and willingly put themselves in the gulags, in the actual gulags, because they thought, defending the system that put them there was more important than defending their own civil rights, and that's what a bad enough system can do to people's brains. You're like, you refuse to let go of this appeal to authority, and all hell happens. Like, that's the most dangerous thing. Like the atomic bomb. And my talk tomorrow is about Oppenheimer and Satoshi Nakamoto and the similarities, like how they harness the power of physics to change human incentive structures. And I think the crucial thing that Oppenheimer left out of his equation, like he saw this thing, he rationalized it, at least according to the movie, he rationalized it to himself by thinking that if we construct this extremely destructive thing, then we end all wars, because game theory says so, because no one will bomb one another anymore, especially not attack the US, because doing so is in all probability a suicidal move. So that's how you stop wars. But he missed his own incentives. Like, he did all the things, all the funding for the Los Alamos and the test bomb and everything, and for him to do his science was this big bag of dangling American shitcoins in front of him, and he grabbed it and thereby put this destructive force in the hands of the absolutely the wrong people. I mean, this is the thing. Science is beautiful. Science is fantastic, but it always ends up in the hands of the absolute wrong people. That is governments, because they're a force for evil. Like, and this thing is so left out of the equation at all times. I think like the lessons from World War II and everything, the thing that's missing from the conversation is just that, I mean, if you don't want to be a Nazi, don't be a nationalist and don't be a socialist. Like, this is like,
wait,
we're missing the point.
A Nazi?
Like,
oh my God.
Stop appealing to authority. That is the problem.
Well, and it's interesting because Oppenheimer had the particular danger of who and how he was in the world, that it gave him a particular egoism to have him believe that was okay.
Yeah, it was put on a pedestal.
Well, and it makes me think of the parable of the frog and the scorpion, where the scorpion, it's like, hey, like, give me a ride across the river, frog. And the frog's like, well, you're a scorpion. You're going to sting me. Like, I shouldn't do that. And he's like, no, why would I sting you? If I sting you, we both die. Why would I do that? And frog's like, okay. Frog gives him a ride halfway through. Scorpion stings him. The frog goes, what the fuck, man? We're both going to die now. And he's like, yeah, I'm a scorpion. Like, what did you think I was going to do? And it's really important to understand that, like, this is just the nature of what the individuals who wind up in politics wants, because it's a power game and a power dynamic. So they're going to say whatever they need to say in order to be successful.
Yeah.
So it's like, I empathize towards Oppenheimer because it's important to understand that there was a whole class of powerful men who came to Oppenheimer and like, if you don't do this, we're all going to die because the Nazis get the bomb first, and it's going to be a catastrophic and horrific thing. And what's really interesting is that...
Which in the end, it became anyway.
Yeah. And like it almost became this sad unavoidability that, because of the way that the conflict was escalating and how technology had offered its service in this way.
Did you see the movie, by the way?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I probably will at some point, but I just wasn't necessarily inspired.
No. I mean, it's what you'd expect from Nolan. I mean, it's well acted. The cinematography is great. I mean, a lot of the things about the movie is great, but it's somewhat unnecessarily convoluted because I think he sometimes does that for its own sake. Makes the movies more complicated than they need to be.
Okay,
but overall, it's a very good movie, I'd say.
I also just kind of take issue with some general historic revisionisms that happens through Hollywood. And like I think it's a general inevitability, but I just find it dramatizes all of this in a way that I think it's really important to understand that, like, when Oppenheimer was doing this, like, he had no idea if he was going to be successful. He didn't understand the consequences of it, which I think for Oppenheimer particularly is important of that. I think it's really interesting because in the actual literature, he says that the quote about, I am becoming Shiva, the destroyer of worlds. Yeah. He said that specifically came to him. Not that he thought it, but that, like, that's what came into him.
So that's a quote from who wrote
the Bhagavad Gita.
The Bhagavad Gita. Yeah.
And I think that that's of particular importance just because when he witnessed the horrific destruction it could entail, he realized the fundamental truth of that. Like, he was engaging in some very serious metaphysical stuff that could destroy humanity on a whole.
There's a quote from the movie. There's a near zero chance that we might destroy the entire planet because we might set off a chain reaction.
Well, to me, this is one of the places we're at today that I think is so important with where Panoptic Technology is at and with where the developments of AI is at. Is that these are very, very powerful and very, very dangerous tools that we have put them in the hands of morons that have politicized it. And furthermore, like, we're already seeing what the structures look like when implemented. And I always like to point out that the Uyghur genocide going on in China, like, this is the perfect genocide because they realize that it's different from what happened in the Holocaust because they're not trying to actually just destroy an entire people. And the reason why is that they found utilizing both propaganda and technology why should you destroy these perfectly useful bodies? What you need to do is hollow them out first. And so once you can thoroughly destroy people's culture, when you can totally surveil them at all points in time without them knowing when or where, you can actually just liquidate their culture, propagandize them to make them into good little Chinese citizens, and you release them back out into the world to be your slaves. And now you have the perfect genocide because you've liquidated the actual identity of a people's, and you've replaced it with a national identity.
You turned people into dogs, basically.
You know, and as we were joking earlier, the inversion of dog is God. And this is, you know, this is how you get a subservient population that acts like dogs to a god of the state, is by doing this process to them.
And this appeal to some type of authority seems to be inherent in people. And I know, like, I buy the argument for religious belief that it's better to believe in a, you know, guy in the sky than a guy on earth, because a guy on earth is way more dangerous than. But I think the core issue is like this appeal to authority to exist at all, and it seems like a majority of people, it's inherent in them. They need this, you know, they need someone to tell them what to do. There's like they're lost without a. Not without the compass, but without the compass salesman. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And compass salesmen are dangerous.
Well, and I think that this, again, is a product of our general world, because I think, as we see with Bitcoiners, when you're part of a culture where it encourages self-thought and the ability to rely on yourself and to think for yourself, that's like a muscle that people can work and cultivate for themselves. And when you're in a bigger community that does that, you've now elevated this behavior to be an honorable and virtuous thing. And so this is one of the things that gives me great hope, is that like, as many NPCs are out there and as dangerous and destructive as it is without being able to have people think for themselves, this is all a product of pliable people that have been manipulated under terms of both duress and promises of good stuff. And this is one of the things I always find the most intriguing about talking with NPCs about their perspectives, is that they always have a very optimistic and hopeful viewpoint that trusts the goodness in the other, which is like that's a really great thing that we need to have. But we absolutely need to make sure that isn't polluted with just a general appeal to authority.
I have a point on this one. This is like a thing in the vision of where Bitcoin is going to take us that I still somewhat can't get my head around, and it is that if we do fix the monetary system and get that all working fine, and its incentives are good and everything, and reduce the size of government and all this, what do we still do about people who are just going to still ignore that and be aggressive? And even though the incentives might be reduced towards aggression, there are still people who just naturally want to take, and I mean, I'll be specific as well. Like, it's a male thing.
The way I see it is that what you remove is the smart criminals. You don't remove the stupid criminals, like that are going to just, you know, go to a football game and kick the shit out of one another because they supported the wrong team or whatever. So that will probably still be around. Just this brute aggressivity. But still, a clever person will realize that if you don't know how much another person owns, and you can't really take it by force because it's in their heads, so you can't kill them, then no one gets anything. What game theory tells us about that is, like, at best you get away with 50% of that person's Bitcoin. So it's probably better to interact peacefully. So you, like, remove the real dangerous people, the psychopaths, the people in charge that conduct world wars and so on. So that's what you take away. But petty crime, like, there will, of course, still be teenagers, and there will be grunts, people in British pubs saying "oi," you know.
What was the example you were going to use?
What I was thinking of is that our friend Yoni was telling me a little bit about this, that there have been some gang attacks in Sweden where people have, like, chopped off fingers or something if they don't give them whatever they're looking for, and like it's just dark stuff, right? And I think, what was I latching onto from what you said? It's just something like, where are we headed? I still don't see the solution where it's not exactly about solving the issue of human nature towards violence. It's more like, what structures are we going to still need to have that look a lot like today's governments? Like, that's the thing that still gets me. And I'm not even thinking in the vein of that we're going to need some kind of actual daddy government. That's not what I'm thinking.
You're going to need law.
Well, yeah, and I think that this is where stuff gets really interesting, because where we're at right now is so extremely rudimentary in terms of the form of law that Bitcoin provides, because it's essentially all transactional right now. But one of the things that I imagine is using something like mini scripts or MFN or whatever multi-sig scheme you want, that there's essentially an ability to put your money into that multi-sig scheme. Guy shows up to cut off my fingers, and I go, look, you can look at the address, you can see how much money is there. This isn't a multi-sig that I don't control. And because you asked me to put my password first, I put in actually like a panic password that has now messaged all of the other owners of these private keys.
Yeah. And
they know if they show up within the next block with a shotgun to kill you, that they're going to get the amount of money, they're going to get 10% of the wallet or however much we've agreed upon. And also that's fluid based upon how quick they respond, who they are, where they're at. And essentially, like, I think what we're going to do vis-a-vis cryptography, and essentially with the time chain as this backbone to sort of keep truth within the sort of law that we're going to implement, we're going to create a new form of law that utilizes the cryptographic protocol in such a way that we're going to start playing with it and doing these really interesting things. And it's funny, this reminds me of a quote from my favorite philosopher who I base most of my work off of, Giorgio Agamben. And he says that, and this is kind of paraphrasing, but essentially it's like, when humanity starts to play with law as like a disused object, similar to how children play with a disused object, we can return law not in order to restore it to its canonical use, but in order to free us from it for good. And so to me, like, the great problem with law today is it represents a raw and thoughtless form of authoritarianism that has nothing to do with the law at all. The law is actually about the consensus of what we agree upon to be the law. And it's very, very important to understand what the law is in its traditional form, as it is called a commonwealth. This is the traditional idea of what law is supposed to be. So first of all, commonwealth, that's literally what Bitcoin is. It is a wealth that we hold in common because it provides a unitary form of law for both of us.
Yeah.
But even more interesting is the Latin translation of commonwealth is res publica. This means the public thing. And what's interesting is that the law is the most public of all things to all people. And we live in a world today where we don't have a law anymore. There's a two-tiered society where there are some people that can get away with the most heinous of all crimes. And most particularly, the 20th century was a story of multiple genocides where hundreds of millions of people were killed and not a single individual was murdered. That's extremely important to understand, that hundreds of millions of people were destroyed and deprived of their life, but not a single human was murdered. Because murder is a legal crime. And not a single Jew was killed in the Holocaust was illegal, because they were all stripped of citizenship first. And that made sure that they had no access to the law in and of itself. This is where we are at today. And I also believe that the crimes that happened in World War II were so extreme and significant that it obliterated the law totally, because it showed that once you had psychopaths in charge of a nation state, they could utilize the policies of the state to destroy other populations of people. And we've witnessed that same strategy executed multiple times since then.
Yeah. So what about the case for optimism, though? So like
I'm always so dark that people need to press that.
Yeah. So because a way to look at this is like, we have Bitcoin. We have social media. Sure, you can be shadow banned and you can have a harder time reaching the person you want to reach and whatever. But still, even the flawed social media platforms we have today, and then Nostr and other alternatives are blossoming up slowly but surely as well. But we have those tools, and like post-COVID or post the lockdowns, Zoom calls and stuff have become insanely much better than they were pre-COVID. Like no one was really doing Zoom calls on a daily basis before the lockdowns. So that sort of forced us to develop this technology. And now you can reach any person regardless of where they are on the globe. I mean, we can record a podcast with Rob, for instance, when he's in Hawaii with no lag. And the program we use, the AIs are so good now, and there's a race to become the dominant software for stuff like this. So the program can edit this stuff for us, cut out the noise. If we have two cameras, it switches to the person that's about to talk before he starts talking. All of this stuff is happening in real time. It's the speed of the technology improvements is just insane how good that is. And so all those tools are there, and and you add Bitcoin to that. It's just all the tools are there. I talked to my friend Christian, the founder of BTCX, the oldest Swedish exchange, and he gave me some numbers of how many customers they have had over the years, and he said around 300,000. And there's another big Swedish exchange, and so if you take into account that there might be some customers that use both services, but they're about as big. So add another 100,000, that's 400,000. And let's say there's 100,000 people that bought off of other exchanges or acquired.
Sweden's population?
10 million.
Okay.
So it's 5% of the population that has the power to pay people in Bitcoin because they all own Bitcoin. And 100% of the population has the ability to receive Bitcoin. So the economy is already there. Mm-hmm. We just have to tap into it. People just have to start accepting Bitcoin for the goods and services, and you're out. You don't have to worry about the government anymore. Like it's really that simple. And if you add all the, as you were alluding to, the multi-sigs and the coin joins and whatnot, and like all these technologies, they are already there, and the educational platforms and the content that is out there, you can learn how to be a sovereign individual. I mean, I'm working on a course based on my praxeology book on a platform called Emeralize, which is like Udemy and powered by Lightning. So it's a cross between Udemy and maybe Substack. Yeah. And this course is going to be a part of a master's program in self-sovereignty. And this is not the only thing. I'm just a tiny part of them. Emeralize is also just a tiny part of this ecosystem that is building around this thing. So I think there's a great case to be made for, we've got this. Everyone in this community knows that CBDCs are shit. And we know that there are ways around all these things. And people are going to look at us like, look at those guys. They seem to be happy and not worried about stuff. And that's going to, it smittens people. So I think, and I think that's smittens. Is that even a word?
To be smitten. Yeah, to be smitten. It's a word now.
That is important because that's how we grow the community, and the spreading this optimism about the future, because being angry at stuff and just focusing on this was so fucking bad and this is so fucking bad and we need to fight this and we need to just don't worry about it. It's don't retweet shitcoiners. don't promote governments. Don't even talk about it. Just show people there's a way to live life without worries, because you got a tiny stack and it's going to last forever.
No, I mean, there's a great point, particularly for the angry rant guy. It's probably pretty important for me to emphasize that I feel a greater amount of hope than I've ever felt, and every day it grows more.
Good to hear it.
And you said at the beginning, you'd use the word bloom, and that hooked me because I think right now we're going through a renaissance that is a bloom of ideas that are exploding, and there are so many things going on and it's growing. And like you said, we have all of the technology, the ability. So much is just an educational aspect. And so maybe I'm mistaken, but maybe that gap is going to be much shorter than we think. And I think there's a pretty strong argument to say that it will be shorter just because we have such a pliable herd population that once they actually see that like fiat has been defeated and that Bitcoin is here.
Yeah.
And I love pointing out that like the word evangelical in Latin means the bringer of good news. And that's what we're doing as Bitcoiners. We're bringing the good news of what Bitcoin is. And it could be very possible that all of these evil forces see this and they go, oh shit, like the game's up. I guess we got to play nice now. But in addition to that, like this is all initiated through a totally new form of thought that is the self-responsibility to think for yourself.
Yeah.
And like that's causing for this extraordinary bloom that, you know, like I think Fiat Joff even said part of his inspiration for how he built Nostr was seeing how the Bitcoin network operated and having that core cryptographic protocol at its core was what allowed it. Yeah. You know, and so for me, what crypto sovereignty is, it's about the artistry of utilizing cryptography in this way to create new systems that we can utilize for self-empowerment. Mm-hmm. And Nostr is an excellent example of that. You know, Tor is a great example of that. But what I want to see is pretty much the entire internet get rebuilt on top of cryptographic protocols like this.
It should have been there all along. That's the thing. So we sort of have to rebuild it.
So how are you enjoying this episode so far? Before we dive back in, first a little bit about our sponsors. First up, Wasabi Wallet, the privacy by default, open source, non-custodial Bitcoin wallet with CoinJoin built in. It's the easy to use, comprehensive, affordable way to make your coins private. And the best part is they've been making huge improvements to the app. They're really focusing on the user experience, adding advanced features for power users. They just keep getting better. You send your coins to your Wasabi wallet and they get combined with loads of other coins using the Wabi-Sabi protocol, so they're private on the other end. Your tracks are covered, so you can work on expanding your freedom footprint without worrying about your privacy. So check out wasabiwallet.io and download Wasabi today. Next up, Orange Pill app, the Bitcoin social layer app for iOS and Android, where you can stack friends who stack sats. You can connect with your favorite Bitcoiners on the app, make local connections, and even connect with Bitcoiners around the world. And a big feature on Orange Pill app is events. You can see what's going on in your area and connect with Bitcoiners around you. I've been to multiple Orange Pill app events and they brought Bitcoiners together from all over. The best part is, you know it's high signal. There's no spam on Orange Pill app because everyone pays to be there. It's just $3 a month. So download Orange Pill app on Apple or Android and get connected to the Bitcoin social layer. Next up, our new sponsor, the Bitcoin Way. Their mission is to onboard, educate, and remove barriers to taking self-custody of your Bitcoin. They cover everything from cold wallets to nodes, no KYC Bitcoin purchases, inheritance planning, payments, and more. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or you're an experienced Bitcoiner looking to expand your freedom footprint, or you know someone who this sounds perfect for, the Bitcoin Way has something for you. They have a skilled team, well-versed in the Bitcoin space, and their goal is to make all the complexities of Bitcoin as straightforward as possible for everyone. And the best part is you can get started with a free 30-minute call with their team. Go to thebitcoinway.com/contact for more info. All right, back to it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and brush your teeth.
Okay, so this actually gets into like a question that we've been going at with a few people.
The Nostr stuff?
The Nostr stuff. I think to your point, I think there is a kind of a general idea here about kind of these protocols that are built on cryptography, but they're not built on Bitcoin, right? So it's Bitcoin adjacent Nostr in that it heavily endorses the use of Bitcoin zaps and using your Bitcoin private key to generate your Nostr profile, all this, but it's not built on Bitcoin. It is a separate protocol, and like what is the role of the cryptography part in this? Like, how important is that part where Bitcoin fixes the money, but the cryptography kind of can do other things that are not Bitcoin? And I would guess you don't have like a shitcoiny perspective on this in the sense of that.
No, and like one of the things I think is really important about understanding shitcoinery is I reject shitcoinery because it does not elevate itself to the position that Satoshi Nakamoto presented Bitcoin on. Look, like if Ben Armstrong wants to issue Bencoin and he wants it to get to a market cap of $10 billion and he doesn't spend a single cent of that and the state doesn't destroy him and he distributes it and he does this bootstrap from the very beginning, like maybe there actually is merit to that and maybe it should be successful, but he absolutely didn't do that. Every single shitcoin project has been a cash grab for the founders. No one has tried to actually emulate what Satoshi Nakamoto did. And even if they did, like the best example I can think of is Grincoin tried to do a fair launch, had an anonymous founder, all that. And even with that, all the VCs fucking piled in and they all spun up AWS servers and it was a total shit show. So I think what Satoshi Nakamoto accomplished at this point in time is fundamentally unachievable by shitcoins because of how he presented it and what he did to it. But furthermore, to get back to your question about cryptography itself, to me, this is the absolute key of all things because what allows for us to understand the supply of Bitcoin is the cryptographic proofs that are provided. If we didn't have those cryptographic proofs, there would be no way to actually tell otherwise. And so to me, it's about a technique of presenting information and then proofing it in such a way to say, look at the truth that I've actually implemented here. And so Nostr does the same thing with having a chain of information. And so I'm extremely excited about seeing this generalized technique get applied to other places. Because what happens when we get a protocol for, say, self-encrypted VoIP, where you get to own your own servers, you know that the connection is going to be end-to-end encrypted. And like, again, this is one of the extraordinary things that happened in the concourse of human history is up until the Diffel-Hyman paper in, I think, 1976, A New Direction in Cryptography, there was a single direction in cryptography that none of this shit was even possible. It didn't even seem possible. It was, and this is one of those funny things is that, like, I think if you were to go back, a century ago and to talk with philosophers and to say, hey, there's this like magical space that you can write into and talk to anybody on the planet. And they would just be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like this couldn't happen. It doesn't make any sense. There's no even point of thinking about it.
Okay. The problem I have with all of this cryptography talk is that this, which was the title of Gigi's talk.
Cryptography is not enough.
Yeah, exactly. The thing I like, it's all just numbers. Mm-hmm. It's all just information. At its core, Bitcoin is just a bunch of on and off switches in a specific order. It's nothing but that. Like it's 1 0 0 0 1 1 1 1. That's all it is. And communication through numbers. So Satoshi found a way to do numbers and communication in such a way that we figured out how to bootstrap a system that was that created a number that was resistant to replicability. So any attempt at replicating that discovery, to me, is redundant at best and a cheap cash grab for the most part, because people are stupid and they don't realize that you can't copy uncopyableness. So that's why I don't really get how all the other stuff comes in, because this system already exists, and this number, the Satoshi, represents that. It represents something that can't be replicated. So any attempt at, end-to-end encryption is fine, but it's not more valuable than, the value lies in you being able to send a message and making sure that no third party can see it. But that's sort of end of story. The economic incentives for a social media platform, for instance, like the users may own their data, quote unquote, but they're still subject to whoever runs the relay, the Nostr relay or whatever. Or like, I somewhat suspect that the same thing that happened to, the email protocol, like SMTP and whatnot, all the other internet protocols that had no, Bitcoin and the base layer, that the same type of centralization may play out on all these other attempts at making it decentralized, because that word decentralized, it gets thrown around like it's a trivial thing. But, decentralization is, first of all, subjective. view decentralization differently than any other person, and that at any, like everything else, it's subjective. And to me, Bitcoin is sufficiently decentralized because I saw the SegWit 2x hard fork fail. That's the point in time for me that made me believe in this thing robustly. Like, holy shit, the users really are in charge. It is unchangeable. But none of the other things that are, throwing this cryptography buzzwords around and the word decentralization around have ever shown me something even remotely akin to that, or like the rejection of the SegWit 2x hard fork. We haven't seen that anywhere else. So I don't really see how Nostr, for instance, can achieve something like that. It might, but at this point, we have no clue if it will do that, or if it will just turn into this centralized nightmare.
Well, and I think one for Nostr, that's really important to keep that question sort of open-ended, because I think up until we feel certain about it actually being decentralized, that is a true open-ended question.
Right now, it's sort of a taboo subject in the Bitcoin community, because we got this new decentralized thing, and Jack Dorsey's on board, and we need to promote this thing, and leave all the other networks without knowing where it's going. Well, or if it even works.
It's interesting they sort of tap onto this idea of taboo subjects within because another great one that I think is taboo is El Salvador. I'm very suspicious of El Salvador and what it's doing. And
of course, it's a government.
Well, and the idea of what Chivo Wallet is I think that this is a really great way to backdoor Bitcoiners and be able to create surveillance on a generalized chain. Which, essentially you use Chivo Wallet to then pollute all of the outside users that then gives you, a tainted perspective that you can utilize.
Okay, another thought about AI. I think what most people misinterpret about AI, and this comes a lot from deep diving into praxeology, that what the thing AI lacks is agency.
Yeah.
So we don't even know if we have free will or not. I love the Hitchens quote, of course I have free will, I have no choice but to have it. but it certainly seems like if you take praxeology for a true science, which I happen to do, I think is a very good framework for understanding the world, then you see that in order for an action to be deliberate, there needs to be it needs to be preceded by a felt uneasiness on the thing acting. So in order for you to act, you need to feel somewhat uneasy. You imagine a future where you do a thing and you get into a better state. It's
the pursuit of my desire.
Yeah. There's a pursuit of your means and ends. That's the basis of all action, deliberate action. And an AI is absolutely not that. It can never be the master. It can only be the slave. It can never make decisions on its own. And people fear this general AI. What they really mean when they say general purpose AI is an AI with agency, basically Skynet or Terminators or whatever.
Yeah.
Or the Matrix. That it all of a sudden consciousness pops up in this string of ones and zeros, and all of a sudden it can make decisions by itself. Right now, it's not doing that. It's making micro decisions about whatever you prompt it to do, but it's never acting out of because of a felt uneasiness, because it doesn't feel anything as far as we know anyway.
Sure.
And so I think that's what the fears about it are exaggerated because of exactly that. It doesn't have agency. It doesn't know what it wants. It doesn't want anything.
Well, to be fair, first of all, the people that are really worried about it, they're retarded.
They're midwits.
This is the same people who utilize the term hacker, who hacking is a magical way that you just get access to information, and they don't realize, no, it's flawed security protocols.
Yeah.
And so to me, AI is like a meta tenche, it's a technique that we can apply stuff to, and it's really valuable because, if you need to build out a database when you're coding, instead of doing that, you just go, yo, ChatGPT, build my database.
Yeah.
Super valuable. Great. The big problem, I think, is that, again, with people are retarded, that there are people out there, specifically in government, who are like, hey, let's plug this AI thing into our surveillance system and have it locate all the people that we think are bad. You know, like what's a bad person? Like somebody carrying a gun. Like that's a bad person. You know, like
yeah.
And so like I'm afraid that the general idiocy of people who don't understand technology, which again is the vast majority of government, are going to essentially implement these things with no idea about what they're doing. And to be clear, we've already seen that happen in the United States. Like I forget, and I'm very sorry for this because this person needs to be honored and respected. The individual that recently leaked the data from the United States showing that 90% of the people that were fucking murdering with goddamn drone bombs, that decision is made by a fucking AI.
Yeah.
Like literally people are being destroyed by a fucking machine saying, yeah, I'm pretty sure that those brown people need to die because I'm 8 miles away, 3,000 or 30,000 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Like that's a very special kind of insanity that's deeply worrying. So it's not AI at all. It's the fucking retards behind the AI.
This reminds me so much of a particular scene from the Oppenheimer movie. And it's where they pick the targets for the bombs. Like, so they're in this room and they're like, how do we demonstrate how fantastic our wonderful new bomb is? And they like, we should choose a military target. Nah, but it needs to make bigger headlines. Let's choose, Hiroshima. That sounds nice. Like, and okay, Nagasaki as well. So like, and then boom, boom, 210,000 people die from a split-second decision like that. And I don't know how historically accurate that actually is, but still, this is the problem of human incentives that needs to be solved. There needs to be a way to prevent some guy in a room from making a split-second decision that kills 210,000 people. Like that's...
I would like to point out before you go any further, the truth is actually much more horrific because what happened was after the first bomb was dropped, they were given a 48-hour window to give an absolute and unconditional surrender, which the Japanese were more than happy to provide, and they tried to provide it. We prevented them from providing it, and we dropped the second bomb. And to me, like, this represents the same horror and catastrophe that
as in...
Oh, yeah, I should not identify the government.
Those assholes.
And and this represents the same fucking insanity that was the armistice at the end of World War I, where, and this is an extraordinary fact to me, is that the final day of World War I, more men died on that day than during the D-Day invasion of World War II. And it was because these absolute despicable, disgusting parasites that call themselves humans in government said, well, now that we have the armistice established at 11 p.m. on 11/11, let's do a full press assault and see how many of the other people we can kill before the game is done.
Yeah.
And like
that's horrible.
This is a sort of madness that happens when we relegate the responsibility to other individuals to make choices about life and death.
But to me, this is the most important aspect of Bitcoin, because what it does, the core invention is that it removes the hands of these parasitic institutions to leash off the value of other people transacting voluntarily with one another. There's no way to, shadowy tax people through inflation when people are transacting in Bitcoin. There's no way for a third party to get any of that transaction. Sure, you pay some fee to the miners, but there's a free market for that. Like, there's no way for these assholes to extract value from others anymore. And that's the key thing, because that's what kills the ability for these people to sit in rooms and just pick targets at random.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't understand that, like, that function by itself collapses all world governments today. The simple inability to be able to steal from people, that collapses every single government today.
Yeah.
And to be clear, like, that doesn't just mean now we live in willy-nilly chaos and everybody murders everybody else. No. Like, this is a process that we must go through to clear out the space to allow for the potentiality of the next form of the political to present itself, which I'm convinced the internet is going to play a major and pivotal role in the next form of And I'm very pedantic about this idea of the political versus politics,
Mm-hmm.
because to me, the political is about the radical potentiality that people will always have to choose their forms of life versus the contemporary parliamentary democratic forms that we're told creates law and is politics.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's a very important distinction, because today there is no people anywhere that have access to any form of the political, because we've all been forced to be subservient to politics.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin to me opens us up to the possibility of the political.
That's a great way of framing it. And
Well, that's a concept from Carl Schmitt, the famous Nazi jurist, who I do a lot of work. It's fucked up. I do a lot of work with Nazi philosophers, not because I'm a Nazi, but because I have a very, very strong critique of these philosophers who are very important, but because the way that liberal wokeism won't deal with them, they avoid what they present entirely, and it's extremely destructive to philosophy.
Yeah, I think you just hit on something important. Like the idea of, I don't have this thought fully formed. It just came to me from what you just said. But the idea that you can just memory hole ideas because they're somehow associated with the wrong thing. Like
it's 1984.
Well, sure. Not a real example exactly, but if someone says something, J.K. Rowling. Okay, this I'll use as the example. Like there is a serious group of people who will not touch Harry Potter or anything because J.K. Rowling has wrong think.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is one of the most popular book franchises ever, basically, and people liked it for certain reasons, right? But because someone has a wrong opinion, they get completely memory holed. I won't mention I'm mentioning it explicitly. J.K. Rowling is not a Nazi philosopher, so just to throw that out there. But the example is the memory holding of ideas and then not dealing with it. So I guess to come to an actual point here is like, how do we deal with the type of culture that wants to erase ideas instead of dealing with them?
Yeah, just to emphasize on the J.K. Rowling thing before because before the answer, because these young actors and actresses that shun her because she claimed that trans women aren't women or something, whatever she said. The only reason that they have a life at all is because of her works. So imagine what's the word? It's so gross that people who are talk about biting the hand that feeds you for the wrong reason. Like they would be nothing without her.
Yeah, but so that whole idea though, like you look at these philosophers, what even compelled you to do that, and how do you think we combat the memory holding of these of ideas that are associated with controversial people or non-controversial people?
I mean, one of the things that inspired it, first of all, like my whole philosophical pursuit is like my own leisure and pleasure. So like I wasn't contained within an academic framework that usually deprives people of it. So like a philosopher that I deeply respect, Michael Millerman, he was a doctor at the University of Montreal, I believe. Like he was blackballed and kicked out because he was studying individuals like Heidegger. And to be clear, like Heidegger was a Nazi. And I think his philosophy does fundamentally deal with ideas in Nazism because of how it presents an ethnos of peoples. And I also think it's extremely important to be able to deeply read Heidegger and critique him. And I critique him through one of his students, Levinas. And I think it's extremely important because Levinas deals with all of the problems that Heidegger tries to present and then overcomes them through his presentation of the other. But what's really important in regards to your term is that as much as they want to memory hole stuff, you can always bring it back up. And to me, the great example is that I have contentious issues with my own family for a number of reasons. But one of the main ones is look, what happened in COVID was really, really destructive. And it raised certain truths of that in the United States, vaccines are given a very special treatment so that they don't have to go through the same rigorous process of all other medicines. And as much as these people yell and scream and freak out saying, no, it's safe and effective, you can turn back and go, But we have the documentation from 1985 when the Vaccine Acts passed that specifically say vaccines are unavoidably dangerous or unavoidably unsafe.
This is basically the RFK's point that people listen to, like the things that he says, and it's anti-vax, but that is specifically the key point, right? That act enabled all this.
Yeah. And like this is very, very, very important, because as much as we engage in the denial and the propaganda of saying safe and effective, very real people are getting hurt and dying because we're not actually looking at what's going on. So to answer your question, as much as stuff gets memory hold, and like with the J.K. Rowling thing, like, look, like trans people with their individuality, how they identify, how they present them in the world, I absolutely want to honor and respect that for who they are. But when you come to me and you insist that you know, a man is a woman or a woman is a man, that A is B or B is A, I have to stop and go, look, there are some other things going on here that's part of a long and convoluted debate that I don't think you're available for because you just want to shout me down. In the same way that, like, and this is really important to me specifically around free speech and propaganda, is I want other people to be wrong. It's really important for other people to be wrong, or for them to be right and for me to be wrong, and them to present their perspectives, because we need to have dialogue. In the same way that, look, like, I think Mein Kampf should be published, that National Socialists should be public about what they believe in their stances, because I want people to know these people are fucking morons. They're absolutely smooth-brained idiots, and I want them to present their philosophy so that you can go, oh, wow, these guys are just actually racist assholes who don't believe in the agency of other individuals. Wow, what fucking shitty people. Huh?
Yeah.
Instead, well, whereas you censor them, they go, this Hitler guy, they won't let anything about him be out. Like, maybe he had something really important and powerful to say. Like, maybe he was actually like a really smart and great guy. And they don't even see
backfires.
Well, and they don't even see that they contribute and feed back into that in a very powerful way.
Yeah,
that contributes much more so than I think just letting them speak freely.
Did you read a book by Rothbard called The Ethics of Liberty?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah, it to me it was profound because it changed my views on freedom of speech, because he makes the case for the question everyone forgets to ask themselves is freedom of speech where? And if in a libertarian society where where there's absolute property rights, you as the property owner get to set the rules of whatever anyone gets to say or not say on your property. So there's no public space, and therefore, I mean, each individual owning whatever platform gets to set the rules on that platform. And I think this misinterpretation of freedom of speech and what it is, like, because freedom of speech laws are only necessary when there's public property. And so they need to be preceded by theft. It reminds me of I don't know if you heard about the Quran burnings in Sweden.
Yeah, so I have vague awareness.
So the whole Arab world is, or I shouldn't say the whole Arab world, but the Muslim world or the Islamist world or whatever, they're pissed at the Swedes now because there have been some public Quran burnings. And there's a lot of bad things happening because of this. But the thing is that in order to protect free speech, the Swedish government need to employ a lot of police officers to guard these people who want to burn the Quran publicly. And the media reports about it all the time. And there's debate about whether to change the free speech laws and blah, blah, blah. And the government always apologizes to the Arab nations afterwards and like, oh, sorry, but we need to do this here. And the thing is, if there was no police protecting them, if a guy was just, I mean, I could go out and burn a Quran on the street here and no one would care.
Yeah.
The attention this thing gets, that is the problem, not the actual act. It's just that all of these arbitrary things become important because the media machine and the government machine around it fuels the fire. And that's the real problem. It's not the act, and it's not even the people getting pissed at the act. It's
Well,
then again, the real violence is from the people wanting to actually kill people. If you buy a Quran and burn it, it's your property. You're perfectly natural law tells you can't do that. And
this is the whole point of the media, in my opinion, is that when you make these things into extreme things, you pump the emotions to make people get upset and dramatic. You've now prevented all dialogue. And so like I actually think from Quran burning, if people weren't showing up all pissed off wanting to hurt each other and be like, why the fuck are you burning my holy book?
Yeah.
Maybe there could actually be a really deep and constructive conversation.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think like this is the same debate that's going on in the United States around trans stuff. Like I said before, honor and respect these people for there's a very complicated dialogue here that I think is really important to talk about family values in the United States, what we want to represent, and what does it mean that we want to present a culture like this. And more importantly, and I think this is one that doesn't get touched on a lot, is that one of the most important things to me about women is their child rearing ability and the ability for us to make a family together.
Yeah.
Like a trans woman fundamentally doesn't have that capacity. And there's probably a lot of people that would want to say really hateful things to me. And again, like, I don't want to take away from their ability to identify how they want, but
no,
it seems a little disingenuous to me to have this whole dialogue about, trans women are women, but we don't have to worry about child rearing in any way. And that also like, it sets up like a pretty dystopian worldview of like, let's accept what you're saying is totally true, that, like I can be Erica and, you can be Canuta.
Why do you want to be Loretta, Stan?
Well, and look, like, however you want to live and choose to live, that's great. But like, there's this whole other problem that gets presented because we're trying to act like what the media has given us as the truth.
And it's like a pendulum thing, because like all of these fights for certain group rights, they come from these groups being very mistreated in the past.
Absolutely.
So they come from so they're trying to replace one system of authoritarianism with another. So if you think deeply about all of these issues, it all boils down to individualism and property rights. That's the only solution to all of it.
The show is also sponsored by Xelox. That's XELLOX. They've developed the excellent Yokis seed plate kit, the solution against everything life throws at you, including fire, water, corrosion, and pests. The Yokis package includes 3 stainless steel plates and a pen-sized electric engraver so you can write your seed on metal just like writing on paper. And they have big plans. They're developing a next-gen hardware wallet too, but for now, you can order the Yokis to safeguard your keys in a safe and convenient way. Check out Xelox at xelox.io. That's XELLOX.io. And finally, we're also sponsored by BitcoinBook.shop, your source for Bitcoin books in over a dozen languages, including all of Knut's books. Their mission is to translate great Bitcoin and freedom-oriented books into as many languages as possible, while also publishing original titles to get even more knowledge out there. Use code FOOTPRINT for 10% off your purchases at BitcoinBook.shop.
Yeah, I want to take this back, like, just to the general level a little bit, that I've been playing around with an idea that the entire denial of a biological reality comes from that society has abandoned individuals from being able to be comfortable and safe in their identity.
Yeah.
And the reason that I dig into this area is that I think we've understood this as a society. This is important to avoid. So there's a Finnish poem, the Kalevala. It's the Finnish epic poem, and it's an oral tradition thing. It was largely untouched by Christianity, other things like this, compiled in the 1800s. So this is something that came from a long time ago, and there's a whole cycle of how the symbol of society, a guy named Väinämöinen is this magical wizard. Väinämöinen. Yes, but he's the embodiment of society essentially, and he is supposed to take for a wife the maiden Aino. Her name is Aino. The poem is called "The Fate of Aino" in English, but the idea is that the society put an overbearingness on the ability of the young woman to come into her identity, and so she drowns herself in a lake. drowning and a woman drowning herself in a lake is, well, literally quite bad, but symbolically it's the feminine drowning itself in nothingness, putting itself into emptiness. Like a girl chopping off her tits, complete denial of biological reality. It's the thing that these stories I see as actually kind of pointing to is that society is rotten, and society is making these things happen because everything is wrong. Everything is bad incentives. Individuals can't live within themselves. So that's, yeah, it's like another one of my
back to optimism.
well, Eric, what do you think of that?
This is such a complicated topic, and I think that the media has made it so reductivist that it becomes very difficult to have real dialogue about. And so, like, one of my main struggles is that, and I read this from Ambigan, is that I'm so deeply suspicious of that part of what these ideas are is about trying to create this like false idea of individual empowerment to actually strip them of any other form of empowerment that exists in a deeper societal level. And so, like, I think, because like one of the phenomenon, like specifically around this biological and trans thing, is why does it seem that there's so many more male to female trans people than male to female, in addition to the male to female, or I'm sorry, the female to male, sorry, that identity, it's not as hyper vigilant or heard about. And what I think is so interesting is because like the frank truth is, like, look, if a male to female trans person wants to come and compete with me in almost any competition, like, I'm probably going to win, and it's going to be kind of funny. And like, not to be an asshole, but because like, if you're matching me up with somebody who is my same weight category, but can't hold the same muscle mass, like, I'm probably going to dominate them.
Yeah.
But then there's this other weird part with the male to female trans population that presenting themselves as a woman, and this is what Ambigan was pointing out, is that it seems to align with consumer capitalist culture almost perfectly. And I'm very, very suspicious of that, because why is it that you as a woman have the full presentation of a very feminine, sexualized woman, but you don't have the child rearing capacities or the presentation around that, or around like aged womanhood, or like, it all seems to be a deeply sexualized thing. And it just leaves me questioning, in a lot of ways, like, I actually find like it's the most sexist thing that can be presented, because like the identity that you have as a woman is as a sexual object and not as a child rearer. And I like, look, I want to respect too that like saying a woman is only a child rearer is also extremely sexist, and that there's a balance in between the two. But
you can't really have one without the other.
Well, yeah, but what's so interesting is that the extreme viewpoints are both very sexist, in that like a woman is a child rearer and needs to stay in the home. Sexist as hell. A woman is like a sexual fuck object that should only be used for sex. Totally sexist as well. And I think that it's all of the in between. It's the nuance and the complications of having dialogues like this that, in my opinion, traditional media absolutely does not want to have more than anything else. It's very important to make these very contentious, angry, emotional debates that can't reach thoughtful conclusions where we can say, hey, maybe we don't see eye to eye on this, but maybe we can have dialogue.
Yeah.
And to me, like, that's the most important and critical thing that we need to return to, that I think, returning all the way back to Bitcoin, we're doing, is that we're having open dialogue because there aren't guardrails for us. We need to include everything and have all of the debates possible because we just don't know what the real answers are. But, and this is a very important but, I know through the true process of dialogue, of us working together through dialogue to try to figure out what that truth is in between us, that's how we can find it.
Yeah, and there's no other way, because if we remove violence from the equation entirely, which is sort of what Bitcoin does, there's only dialogue left. Like, with humans have two ways of resolving conflict: speech and violence. Well, that's what it boils down to.
And it's so important to know and understand that the very act of trying to engage in speech helps negate the violence that is there otherwise, because we're saying, I don't want to engage in that. I sincerely want to know and understand and talk to you. And I think that that's so important, particularly with where we're at in our media, because our media is deeply uninterested in having conversation. It's very interested in offering vitriol.
Yeah. It wants clicks and likes and retweets and stuff.
Yeah. And it turns out when you say hateful, radicalizing, and absolute dialogues, that drives a lot of clicks. And this is in a large part one of the greater problems that are going on, is because it's reduced our time preference to such a short window that literal journalists are now just media mouthpieces that fundamentally don't even understand what journalism is, and this is part of the destruction of society on a whole right now. That's really sad.
Yeah. Did you hear about the chess association? I don't know what the name of the organization, but there's some international chess association or organization that have they're now preventing trans females from competing in the female category in the chess championships.
Oh yeah.
So it's okay for Leah Thomas to win a swimming competition and her shoulders are like twice as wide as the poor girl who got the silver medal. But in chess is okay. But in chess they can't compete. Like that is so ironic and so awful and so funny at the same time on so many levels. So like I don't really know how to. Yeah.
Well, I think the concept of a separate women's division in chess is super sexist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, well, the only reason it exists basically is that there aren't any women who have climbed the ranks to compete with the guys, basically, because there's been a couple of female chess super grandmasters that have come into basically the top 10 of the world, and one of them was raised as a chess prodigy from her very beginning, Judith Polgar, and she was in the running for one of the world championships like 10-15 years ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are hardly any other women who do that. So it's like,
and you can have whatever theory you want on why that is the case, but it's a game where muscle mass plays absolutely no part. Like,
well, I think nerdiness and time in the game plays a big part.
But regardless, if you think that there are inherent differences between male and female brains or not, why are there different categories? Like, why is that? Why is that a thing at all?
This is one of the great problems that I think have been presented, is that through this homogenizing of all people and saying that a man is a woman, like everybody's equal no matter what at any point in time. This is the same thing that's going on in the United States, with ideas like reparations payments towards people that are former slaves or whatever. First of all, there is no one in the United States today that is a former slave. That's really important.
No, they're current slave.
Well, we're all current tax slaves. But it ends up going to these places that, despite the fact that it doesn't want to be racist or sexist, it becomes like the most racist and the most sexist possible thing.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because this is something that my ex actually pointed out was that, like, in her opinion, and I hope I don't get flamed too much, in her opinion, like trans women are like the most sexist presentation of women, because you have a biological man telling women, insisting to women that they are a woman. And if you deny that they are a woman, that person actually is sexist. And then furthermore, you're having men come into women's competitions, beating the shit out of them in it and saying, you need to respect and honor that because I'm also a woman. Yeah. And again, to me, this is a leg too far. We can say, hey, if you want to have your own category, however you want to identify, but you trying to take away the actual differences between us as people, and furthermore, you just not actually respecting enough in a way to say, hey, maybe. Well, and the thing that I find the most interesting is that I don't want to go into this because I'll go slippery slope with dangerous territory. So.
Okay, so to me, it's easy. Like, anything with the word anti in front of it is that thing. So an anti-racist is a racist. An anti-fascist is a fascist. if you're just a non-racist or a non-fascist, that solves the problem. Like, don't put people into group categories, and you're fine. You're not. You don't fall into any of these categories. An anti-sexist is also sexist. Like a non-sexist is a non-sexist.
So an anti-trans is trans?
Maybe. I mean, like, maybe that's why they're so inflamed about it, is because maybe they really identify that way. You know?
But back to individualism again. Like the smallest minority group is always the person. So respect people, like, for what they are, individuals for what they are. They are not their group belonging. They are not their passport. They're not their skin color. They're not their sex. They're not their gender. They're not they're not their fucking football team. They're a person.
And like, one of the interesting places to extend this to is, like, there's totally intersexed and intergendered people that have 2 X's and a Y, or two Y's and, you know, however. And it's important, again, we want to have space for them. But I think one of the main problems that we've got to do is that, like you were saying, you know, by being anti-racist, we start to become racist. By being, you know, pro-trans or anti-this, that it escalates to the forefront of the dialogue, that feature, which then almost becomes a sort of inescapability, instead of just saying, hey, you're Jenny. Yeah. Like, okay, you used to be Jeff, whatever. Like that. Yeah. That's cool. Like, you know, we can still have a great debate and dialogue. And like, I think the biggest one is why do we have to lead with that? You know, like, why do I have to, you know, like, you don't see me coming in the conversation being like, hello, I'm Erik, a white male. How are you today? You know, and like, people will be like, well, that's because you've always maintained the patriarchal position of white power. You know, I'm like,
some of these leftist catchphrases, though, I really like them because they're actually true. Like, my body, my choice.
Absolutely.
Yes. Apply that to everything, please.
Yeah.
Like, not to absolutely everything.
Well, I'm like, same thing. Like, yeah, guns are horrific tools of violence, and we absolutely need to make sure that dangerous people are stripped of them. And let's start with the military and police, because they kill the most people.
And there's also defund the police. Yes. And every other fucking institution. Yeah. Please start wherever you want. Just defund everything.
Yeah, it's funny. Leftists get really, like, they kind of glitch out when I do that. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Women need to have a right to abortion. And just like in the same way, I need to have a right that nobody should inject me with anything that I don't know about. No, and they're like, well, hang on.
Or to inject yourself with whatever you want, for that matter.
Sure, yeah. And like, 100% I want to respect your body. You should respect that I want to put all kinds of different drugs and stuff into my body, you know? And like,
yeah,
I don't know. At the end of the day, like,
I'd even try baklava if it came to that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, going back to earlier, what we were talking about the positivity, like, we're in the middle of this extraordinary bloom that the internet's providing. And we're like, these dialogues wouldn't happen anywhere else. There would never be a space for it. And people wouldn't even be aware of these forms of thought if it wasn't for the internet.
No.
And so it's so extraordinary that we get to have a space where we get to talk about it. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe there's some point here that I'm absolutely missing, and that, you know, leftists are 100% right. I'm pretty sure they're not, but I'm open to having a dialogue about it, because I probably am missing something.
Yeah. And what is the internet? It's just us communicating. Yeah. It's just an easier way for us to connect and communicate. That's all it is. And it's all through mathematics, which is also language. Like, it's all about communication. Well, as a substitute for violence. That's what it is.
And like, one of the key differences, though, is that now getting to sort of zoom in and use this language of math, like, if I'm providing a cryptographic proof that is one number off, you can be like, that's fucking wrong. And I'm like, oh, hang on, no, we're like really close. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't fucking matter. You're wrong.
Yeah. It doesn't kill the rabbit.
Whereas, like, if I say this beer bottle here is amber, you could go, well, no, that's more of a brown. And I could go, well, it's an well, and there's this metaphorical difference that always happens in language, where we're always 1 degree removed from being able to have some, like we can never actually conclude whether this is brown or amber or something in between. Whereas with a cryptographic proof, it's absolutely certain whether or not this is the same proof or not. And to me, like, that's sort of this more hyper-resolution language that we have access through cryptography, that we're at a very, very rudimentary stage.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're using it almost as monkeys, just with the most rudimentary communication, which, you know, again, in the tradition of all of humanity, returning to the very beginning, is like, this is the fucking origin of language. Like, I encounter another savage in the world and I go, oh, he's shit.
Me, Tarzan, you, Jane.
I'll go away. He goes like, oh, wow, this is a great hat. I can't just like steal his hat. His gods will kill me. So like this bottle and I'll like take this hat. And then you're like, oh shit. Like if I like leave these stupid hats, this guy will like give me these super valuable bottles.
Yeah.
And like, lo and behold, the global economy begins.
Yeah. All trade is communication. And amber is a good word because Bitcoin is cryptographic amber, right? And the more blocks that get added to the time chain, the more amber layers of amber is around that transaction. And it's more and more irreversible the more time flows.
This episode is sponsored by Amber app.
Is our plug for Amber?
No, just kidding.
Give us money, Izzy. So I wanted to do this one. One of my favorite comic strips is from Gary Larson, where he explains the 4 different personality types. So would you say that this glass is half full or half empty?
We'll say half full, just because I'm a positive person.
So you fall into one of these 4 categories. In the first category, it's the people who say it's half full. The second category is the people who say it's half empty. The third category is the indecisive people who say it's half full, half empty. I don't really know. The agnostics of the world, you know. And the fourth category, which I have observed through life, is by far the largest category of people. And it's the people who say, hey, I ordered a cheeseburger.
Yes, that's a good metaphor for all of life. And people approach.
Yeah. Erik, thank you so much for coming on again. We fucking treasure your friendship. And, give us a hug. Let's get it on video.
There we go.
There we go. Get back to the conference.
It's true.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Erik.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
So what did you think of that episode with Erik? His views on crypto sovereignty are definitely thought-provoking. I'm really looking forward to reading his book on the topic. What was your favorite moment? Let us know. You can send us a boostergram on Fountain, leave us a comment on YouTube, or get in touch on Nostr or Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the episode and subscribe to the channel. Our show sponsors are Wasabi Wallet, Orange Pill app, The Bitcoin Way, Zelox, and BitcoinBook.shop. Check out their details in the description. That's all for now. See you next time, and thanks for listening.